to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. It appears the people at Ring Magazine have elected to drop Teofimo Lopez from their pound-for-pound ranked standings. They've dropped him out of the top 10.
I don't really go by their list anyway.
I don't know if you guys do, but I don't. It's hard to reconcile what the rationale here is. I could understand dropping Teofimo from the list if I didn't see Errol Spence at number 8 and Gervonta Davis at number 9. I mean, Errol Spence is coming off a demoralizing loss, a one-sided beating that he hasn't rebounded from yet.
Whereas Teofimo rebounded from his loss 3 fights ago.
The Gumpas fight, the big Josh Taylor win, and the more recent decision win over Jermaine Ortiz.
He didn't look good in that fight.
But Errol Spence Jr. looked good in his.
This is what I mean.
Teofimo, in spite of not looking good in his last fight, he's been something that Errol Spence Jr. has never been at 2 weights. Teofimo Lopez has been not just a champion or a unified champion with the same number of belts as Errol Spence.
3
alphabet titles and the coveted Ring Magazine belt. Errol Spence Jr. has never held the Ring Magazine belt at any weight.
Teofimo has.
Top of Teofimo Lopez being a lineal champion at not just 1 weight, but 2. Where Errol,
If you look at the list, what is it telling you? That Errol's a pound-for-pound fighter, but Teofimo isn't.
think about Teofimo's win over Vasyl Lomachenko, a higher-ranked fighter in every periodical than any fighter that Errol Spence Jr. fought, save Terrence Crawford, who beat him.
What does that mean?
That means that Teofimo's win over Vasyl Lomachenko is better than any win on Errol Spence Jr.'s resume. That means that Teofimo's win over Josh Taylor is a better win than any win on Errol's resume. But Errol's still on the list off a loss, and Teofimo isn't off a win, albeit a controversial one.
I can't reconcile it.
Don't go telling yourself that I'm capping or caping for Teofimo Lopez. I am not a big fan of this fighter. Anybody who follows this channel will know that. I'm just highlighting the inconsistencies and why I don't abide by Ring Magazine's pound-for-pound list. It's because the logic
Is illogical.
it doesn't make sense. When you have Errol there, but you don't have Teofimo there, what you're essentially saying is that Errol off a loss is better than Teofimo off consecutive wins. That Errol's resume is better?
It is?
What, that Errol is a more proven fighter than Teofimo Lopez? That he's a better fighter?
He is?
And on what basis do you make that assertion? By what metric do you say that Errol deserves to be there, but Teofimo doesn't? And it's a popularity contest. It's a popularity vote. All Ring Magazine's pound-for-pound list is an editorial panel that votes, and whoever gets the most votes gets a spot. In essence, a popularity contest, not a skills assessment with a governing criterion that determine who goes where. It's just a bunch of people telling you how they feel.
Fuck how you feel.
Gervonta is there at number 9 where Teofimo's nowhere to be found. Is that to say that Gervonta is a better fighter than Teofimo, having not fought Teofimo or any of the fighters that Teofimo has fought, like Richard Comey, a champion at 135, like Vasyl Lomachenko, who he campaigned alongside at not just 135, but at 130. Before that, Gervonta hasn't fought the fighters that Teofimo has fought at 135, at 140.
He didn't fight Josh Taylor.
He moved up to 140 pounds before Teofimo did, but when he moved up, he didn't fight the man to beat at that weight. He fought some nobody. And Mario Barrios, a secondary titleist with a secondary title.
You know, he's dating Brandon Figueroa's sister.
She's got a great fucking ass.
Yeah.
That doesn't make Mario Barrios a bigger and better scalp at 140 pounds than that division's reigning undisputed champion at that time. No, Gervonta never fought him, but Teofimo, he did.
And for that, you bump Teofimo off the list, but you keep Gervonta Davis there.
You may as well be rewarding him for circumventing Vasyl Lomachenko, for circumventing Shakur Stevenson and Devin Haney and Teofimo. You may as well be rewarding him for not fighting these fighters. You say that, well,
Teofimo looked bad in his last fight, where Gervonta didn't.
Well, is Gervonta fighting the same caliber of fighters as Teofimo? Is he fighting these fighters, and is he beating these fighters?
No.
So how does he get a spot on the list, and Teofimo doesn't? It doesn't make sense. It can't be reconciled unless Your list is not an assessment of skill. It's really not even a...
This is not a pound-for-pound list. It's a popularity contest.
You can structure your list however you want with whatever names you like.
People don't have to agree with you.
The more often that happens, the more often you lose credibility in the process to where you're not highly revered or highly esteemed anymore. There are some good people at Ring Magazine. I'm not saying that they're not. But this list doesn't make sense to me.
Doesn't mean shit to me.
It's why I keep my own, with its own governing criterion. I can't reconcile bumping Teofimo off the list, but keeping these two guys there. That doesn't make sense. If you're gonna bump him off, maybe you bump him off for a Kazuto Ioka, a 4-division champion, a Jinto Nakatani. If he wins his next fight, becomes a 3-division champion. If Kosei Tanaka wins his next fight and becomes a 4-division champion. That if you're gonna bump Teofimo off for somebody else, rightfully it should be somebody like that.
Not these two.
Just more favoritism from the American media. Shameless favoritism. Just in keeping with the theme of all things Teofimo Lopez, Gervonta Davis was not impressed with his performance this past Thursday, saying, quote-unquote, food.
You're the A-side. Go get him.
By the time the final bell rang, there was a belief permeating throughout the arena that an upset had just taken place. Unfortunately for Ortiz, however, all 3 judges sitting ringside weren't convinced that he did enough. Tears ran down Lopez's cheek as he began patting himself on the back. Still, it might have been another win, but Davis wasn't impressed. For now, he will stroll around with his WBO and Ring Magazine Super Lightweight titles strapped to his waist, but if there's ever a time when he does face Davis, the 29-year-old will have his knife and fork ready. Food, wrote Davis on his social media account. Food.
I don't care who you think wins.
I don't fucking care. I don't want to hear what your assessment is, your evaluation, based on whatever you think is relevant. Fuck you and your prediction.
You're irrelevant.
If you think Gervonta Davis is better than Teofimo Lopez, he's a better fighter, better all around, better overall, we're not gathered all here today for you to simply think it. We're here to see it. I mean, that's the point. That's why you watch boxing. To find out who's the best.
Gervonta Davis is the champion of any number of hypothetical matchups that never see the light of day in the real world.
Thought of as being the biggest name and the A-side fighter to any fighter at or around these weights. But if that's the case, then the onus to make that fight with Teofimo would be on him. If you're the A-side, go get him, Tiger.
Do your job.
He's not going to. I know it. You know it, his own fans know it, and he knows it. He can shade Teofimo Lopez as much as he wants on social media, but if push comes to shove, he won't fight him. Even if you do think Gervonta Davis is a better fighter than Teofimo, he's not going to prove it for you.
Then why did I like him so much?
Who's they? I can't stand the little fucking butterball. What supporters he has because his degeneracy is a reflection of their degeneracy. Thus, their affinity for him has absolutely nothing to do with boxing or being the best boxer.
It's got fuck all to do with boxing, so don't expect him to do very much boxing against the elite.
One young fighter who would like to share the ring with Teofimo Lopez is Keyshawn Davis, but Teofimo said he's just big-headed, just wants an easy route to be famous.
Enough about the Baltimore Butterball. I think Keyshawn Davis, I think this young fighter would like to fight Teofimo Lopez. I don't think he's just talking to be talking.
After Keyshawn stopped Pedraza, Lopez immediately dismissed Davis. In a recent interview, the 26-year-old Lopez, a former unified champion at 135, continued to play down Davis as a potential opponent. This kid Keyshawn Davis they're talking about, he just wants an easy route to be famous, Lopez said on the Punch Drunk Boxing podcast. So big-headed, completely big-headed, hasn't done anything in the sport of boxing, doesn't even have a world title. Those little bitty belts that he has, I got that the first year I turned pro. Shit, that was in 3 years. 3 years and some change. I became a world champion at 22 years young, with a win over Vasyl Lomachenko.
Cut the fucking crap, because Keyshawn wants from you what you wanted from Vasyl Lomachenko. He's not clout chasing, he's not big-headed, he's doing his job. It's his job to pursue you, just like it was your job to pursue Lomachenko.
Boxers always act like they're doing something different from everybody else. No, he's doing what he's supposed to do with you. He's after you. And I'm not suggesting that we're on the eve of this fight, but the fact that you're blowing it off, the possibility.
You're talking about moving up and fighting Crawford. Who the fuck do you think believes you?
The fight with Keyshawn Davis is right there, if and when the time comes. Promoter Bob Arum, who promotes both fighters, indicated that he thinks it is too premature for Davis to fight Lopez at this time. Arum was otherwise impressed by Davis's win over Pedraza.
I know Keyshawn wants to fight him, but I think it's a little too early for Keyshawn. Although Keyshawn surprised me Thursday night, he was incredibly good against an experienced fighter.
Keyshawn Davis and Teofimo Lopez have a rivalry brewing, and we caught wind of it during fight week in the buildup of what was Davis versus Pedraza and Lopez versus Ortiz. These two guys sat next to each other, going back and forth, trading barbs, this and that.
I saw Teofimo Lopez say that Keyshawn Davis and Shakur Stevenson, these guys that are talking about him, they're just clout chasing.
They're talking about him?
Shakur is.
Shakur said, broski, that's the same guy that watched Keyshawn knock out his father right in front of him, but then jumps on the camera and talks like he's the toughest guy in the world. Bro, you're pussy. I know you!
You!
In real life.
Is that true? Keyshawn Davis knocked out Senior?
If he did, I can think of at least one way for Teofimo Lopez to pay him back. And listen, when you're in Teofimo's position and you're approaching your prime years, it behooves you to settle these matters sooner rather than later, because the more distance you put between yourself and a Keyshawn Davis, the more time you give him to develop, the more time you give him to grow and amass experience, enough experience to one day beat you.
Just a word of advice.
So when Teofimo Lopez says that these fighters like Shakur Stevenson and Keyshawn Davis are clout chasing him, that's not what clout chasing is. What these two guys are guys who wouldn't mind fighting you, which is the opposite of clout chasing. Clout chasing is when somebody's using your name to have articles written about them, when they're using your name for press and nothing else. Keyshawn isn't doing that. Keyshawn wants to fight you, and that's the job. That's the occupation.
What would people say if he didn't want to fight you?
Nobody likes their own medicine, and what Teofimo is starting to experience is a role reversal of sorts. Keyshawn wants from you what you wanted from Vasyl Lomachenko. You're an established name, like Loma was when you first started to pursue him.
And now young fighters that are coming through, they're starting to pursue you.
And you don't like it. You accuse them of clout chasing, but underneath it all, you know what's going on. You understand it. You understand that you've gone from being the hunter to being the hunted.
Nobody likes their own medicine.
Everybody wants to be thought of as proven and accomplished, but they don't want what comes with it. This is what comes with it.
Back over to Gervonta.
Eddie Hearn said, I think there's enough money in a pot to keep everybody happy, as he maintained that fight can happen this year, but rumor has it Gervonta Davis has already turned down his proposal, turned down his offer. With Gervonta Davis, it always devolves into a tedious argument, a tedious affair with his supporters as to why he doesn't have to fight anyone, but he's better than everyone.
Based on what? How many ugly tattoos he has?
It's not really a fight that I anticipated, but it's a fight that I think can happen. I think if we can all be sensible and sit down and talk numbers, I think there's enough money in the pot to keep everybody happy.
What happened to him being too small for Devin Haney?
Eddie Hearn did say that if they're going to do this thing, it's going to have to be at 147 pounds, which is 7 pounds more than 140, where Devin Haney campaigns. And up until this point, the argument Gervonta's fans have been making is that Devin's too big for him. He's too big. Well, Conor's bigger.
Pump the brakes, because we don't know if he's gonna fight Conor.
If he does, then it's a brazen contradiction of the Devin is too big, he's too big. It's a brazen contradiction of that narrative if Gervonta fights Conor. But we don't know that he's gonna fight Conor, and being honest with you, I'm not holding my breath. There's another fight that Conor Benn is exploring, another fight with another PBC fighter, former 2-division champion, Danny Garcia. Danny Garcia, who was quoted as saying, I'd love to fight him at 154. I think that makes great sense. He wants to fight a big name. Ain't no bigger fight than a Danny Garcia. I watched Benn versus Dobson. I think he did good. That guy that he fought had skills. To which Conor Benn himself replied, "Don't be another loudmouth American, Danny. You or Gervonta Loompa, no problem."
I don't know what Gervonta's gonna do. Being honest with you, I don't care either.
You don't want to fight Shakur, you don't want to fight Devin, you don't want to fight Teofimo, or you do or you don't, or you tweeted at him, who fucking knows? I don't know what's going to materialize with him, being honest with you. I don't care. But Conor Benn versus Danny Garcia, that's intriguing. That's interesting. Up until this point, Danny Garcia's name was attached to an Arislandi Lara fight for Lara's WBA title at middleweight. He was supposed to fight Danny at a catchweight, but now we know that's not happening. Lara has to satisfy his mandatory in Michael Zarafa.
So where does that leave Danny?
The PBC haven't announced any other shows aside from the one set to go down in late March, and if Danny wants to get back out there and he wants to do something, Conor is free. Conor is open.
You think he'd do it?
Well, I mean, look at Ray Vargas, WBC featherweight champion Ray Vargas. He jumped ship. He's supposed to be boxing on the undercard of Joshua versus Ngannou. Think about Subriel Matias. He recently left the PBC.
Just signed a Matchroom. They announced it yesterday.
The PBC haven't announced any other shows aside from the one that's going down in March. And Danny hasn't fought since 2022.
It's over a year ago.
Was it the summer or the spring of 2022?
It's over a year ago.
Danny Garcia, who is best described as a boxer puncher, a counter puncher, but with some deficiencies. He's not that fleet of foot. He's not mobile. He's got heavy feet.
He's not particularly athletic.
He's got a good chin, decent strength, a little bit of pop. Enough he could give Conor Benn something to think about. Enough that he might be able to get Conor Benn's respect. Conor Benn, who's a very aggressive fighter, come forward fighter, combination puncher. You see that stylistic matchup, and stylistically, it favors Danny.
Experience-wise, you have to give Danny the edge, too.
What's working against Danny is that he's in his mid-30s. He's some years older than Conor Benn, a lot less active. Remember, this guy hasn't fought in over a year. That amount of time away from the ring causes the ring rust to pile up, the way your reflexes are dull, your response time is slow.
And how ambitious is this guy? I mean, really?
I don't think Danny Garcia has any fire in the belly per se. I think he'd just be fighting for a check, maybe one last check before he hangs the gloves up. Danny's not that active anyway. He hasn't been the last couple of years.
He fought Errol Spence in late 2020 and took off all of 2021. Came back in 2022, but took off all of 2023.
If he were to fight Conor in either the late spring or early summer, it would be, roughly 2 years since he last saw action? That's a lot of ring rust to have to shake off.
Turns into a situation where it's about who wants it more. I think Conor might want it more than Danny.
He might. It's an intriguing matchup that Danny says he's receptive to. He's saying that. But we'll see if it actually materializes. It's not like he's otherwise preoccupied with anything.